Hello and welcome to the Sports 2.0 show. I'm your host, Jaya Williams, here with Alec Busse.
Hey, how you doing, Jaya?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing well. Put a lot of prep into today's show. Excited to hit all the different topics that we kind of outlined together.
Awesome. Yeah, so we have a few different things to talk about with the NFL today, a lot of different updates. There's a lot of potential trades going on. Chandler Jones at the Cardinals especially, he has no guaranteed money and contract talks have stalled between him and the Cardinals. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it's a really interesting situation. Obviously, Chandler Jones has been one of the premier pass rushers in the NFL really since he signed that contract with the Cardinals entering the 2017 season. He had a career high 19 sacks in 2019. Obviously, he had some injury problems in 2020. He was sidelined for all but 5 games with a biceps injury. So I think there's probably some concern on the Cardinals front about potentially signing him to a longer deal or extending him, especially when they've made the move to sign J.J. Watt this offseason to a 2-year deal. They probably feel a little bit protected in the pass rush now that they have Watt. I would add, though, that I think it was last week, maybe a little bit earlier this week, Jones was with the Arizona Cardinals media day taking pictures with J.J. Watt, and they have expressed some excitement from each of their parties of playing together in 2021. Now, if that continues over to 2022, should Jones get an extension with the Cardinals, I'm sure they'd be excited about that as well. But it's interesting to see how all this is going to pan out in the future if Jones isn't able to get a contract because he's already missing the rookie minicamp.
Yeah, I agree. I was about to bring up the mandatory mini camps. Him missing that, that makes a big statement. And it doesn't really make sense to me because, although he did have that injury issue, I agree with you that he's a great player. He's proven himself season after season. And it honestly surprises me that they were willing to pay J.J. Watt before Jones.
Yeah, I think Watt is obviously the bigger name, and he's definitely put up a lot of stats in the past. But I think that the concern with J.J. Watt is similar to what it has to be with Jones, and just the fact that he's had so many injury problems throughout the last 3-4 years. He's had pec problems. I think he tore his pec, was that 2 years ago? He's had bicep problems as well, and I think he had some lower body issues as well. So if those two guys are able to stay healthy and actually get on the field, the Cardinals look like they'd have a pretty good pass rush on the defensive side, which would obviously go well with their offensive side led by Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the Cardinals are able to work this out. And there are teams who I think would be interested in Chandler Jones, but I think they want to see his physical. They want to see what kind of shape he's in before they go through and make those trades.
Right, yeah. Watt is honestly probably out of his prime too, but him and Jones together could make a good pass rush. So it will be interesting to see what happens with the Cardinals. In other news, Julio Jones has also been traded to the Tennessee Titans. I think this is an instant upgrade for the Titans. I think he'll do a great job on offense there. What do you think about this trade?
Yeah, so I think this is a really interesting deal for a couple of reasons. One, I thought Julio Jones was worth a first-round pick to some teams. I know that there was some discussion amongst other media members around the Chiefs potentially being interested in Julio Jones and surrendering a first-round pick for it. Obviously, they need to replace Sammy Watkins in Kansas City, and Julio Jones would obviously be a huge upgrade there. And if you're the Chiefs, trading a 28th overall first-round pick, that's probably worth it for Julio Jones. Now, for the Titans, I think it's a really interesting move. Obviously, it pairs A.J. Brown on one side, on the outside, it pairs Julio Jones on the other side, and obviously Derrick Henry at running back is one of the 3 best backs in the NFL, especially just pure runners. So they have the tools, skill position-wise, to really move the ball. The question comes down to if Ryan Tannehill is going to be good enough to carry the Titans far enough in the AFC playoffs, and if their defense is going to be good enough. We've seen their defense really struggle a lot since that 2019 run where they upset the Ravens in the first round. So, and Tannehill, to me, if you go back and look at the AFC quarterbacks who have won an AFC championship, you have to go all the way back to 2012 to find a time it wasn't Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, or Patrick Mahomes. And obviously, I think those 3 guys are in a much different class than Ryan Tannehill is. So it'll be interesting to see if the Titans are able to kind of get to that next level on the defensive side, and if Tannehill's good enough to get the Titans to that next step.
I agree. Tannehill is a very efficient quarterback. So I think he'll be able to shoulder the offense. The defense is definitely a concern. But speaking of quarterbacks, it's also a big deal to talk about the Aaron Rodgers situation, the potential issues with the Green Bay Packers. What do you think about what's going on?
I mean, I feel like this is just a saga that's going on and on and on. I feel like this news broke draft night, which was around April 29th, April 30th, around then. It feels like new things kind of come out around this on a daily or weekly basis, and it seems to never be going in the Packers' favor. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing to follow. And honestly, despite Rodgers having 3 years left on his deal, and I think that does create some leverage for Green Bay, I honestly think that Rodgers has almost all the leverage in this situation because he's 37 years old. So he doesn't have that much longer. I mean, if he stays in the league for another 3 years, he's going to be 40. And we've seen only of recently Drew Brees and Tom Brady be able to stay in the league and produce at that age. So that's a concern if you're trading for him. Two, I don't think there's a lot of teams out there that can trade for him. And I think that there's very few teams that are out there that want to trade for him and can win if they trade for him. I mean, the Broncos are a team that seems to always be thrown out there in the conversation. I think even if the Broncos get Aaron Rodgers, they're not the best team in their division, and they're probably not even close to the best team in their division behind the Chiefs. So that's really interesting to me. I think the most logical fit for him would have been San Francisco, and we'll eventually talk about their quarterback situation later in the show, but they have two quarterbacks now. They're not going to trade for another one. And I think the best path moving forward for Green Bay is probably just to wait it out until training camp comes around. Either Rodgers is going to show up or he's not. If he doesn't show up, maybe there's another team who needs a quarterback. Maybe there's a quarterback who tears his ACL or gets hurt and early in training camp, and they're all right. Let's go get a quarterback. Let's see if we can get Aaron Rodgers and maybe get lucky and compete for a Super Bowl. Or November trade deadline comes around, teams kind of floating around there doing better than what they thought they would, and they're able to trade for Rodgers and get some momentum during the regular season.
Yeah. I mean, this is a big pattern. We've seen this with Rodgers before. He's had many disagreements with the organization before. I still think he'll play for the Packers simply because I don't think the organization has a strong enough replacement for a starting QB to let Rodgers go. But, I mean, he's done this before with Mike McCarthy, and he's the reason McCarthy was let go. But in fairness, the Packers have never really given him receiver help, and his only consistent weapon is really Devontae Adams. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, but like you said, it is an ongoing saga. It just seems like they can't stop giving us updates about it, in the media.
Yeah, and it seems to get better and better as these mandatory mini camps kind of have developed. Right. Obviously, the news yesterday was Jordan Love did not do well at all, especially in a 2-minute drill at the end of practice. I think he struggled to get Green Bay to past the 50-yard line, and his final throw was overthrown pretty poorly. But then today, reports came out that he had a really good stretch of throws. He hit A.J. Dillon on about a 30-yard pass. He had a deep play to Lazard for about another 45 yards, and then another deep corner route to Juwan Winfrey for about 30 yards, and then down the sideline again to Aaron Jones for another 30 yards. So, he clearly has the ability to do it, and he did it today. It sounds like he struggled with a little bit more yesterday. Granted, he's still young, and accuracy apparently is still Green Bay's concern with him. So Jordan Love seems to be not necessarily the problem child in this conversation, but maybe where the problem started. I mean, you think back to what Rodgers said on Kenny Mayne's last Sports Center about how the Packers aren't doing things the right way or whatever, but at the same time saying he has no problems or no ill will towards Jordan Love. It's a weird situation to kind of monitor, and there seems to be some weird friction between Rodgers and Love, but Rodgers isn't going to say it publicly.
It's a lot of tension. I mean, drafting Jordan was honestly baffling. I don't really know why they did it, because it only made relations worse, which is why Rodgers now calling for the general manager to be fired. I think it did all kind of start with Love, and I mean, as he plays inconsistently in training camp, I think it'll just make the Packers more desperate. And then Rodgers will just sit back eating his popcorn as he has really nothing to lose right now. So, I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the situation so interesting is Rodgers is 37 years old. He's about to get married. He's accomplished seemingly everything in the NFL, right? I mean, he's got a couple of MVPs. He's won a Super Bowl. I mean, obviously he wants another ring, but
he's chilling. He's
done everything that he can do. So, like, he can retire if he wants and sail off into the sunset after an MVP season and call it a day and leave Green Bay. And I don't think it's any like I don't think Green Bay is some juggernaut without Aaron Rodgers. I mean, they might not even win their division if they don't have Aaron Rodgers. In fact, they might be the second or third best team in their division if they don't have Rodgers next year. I mean, Adam Schefter said that yesterday on ESPN that they know that if they don't have Rodgers, they're not going to be good. So Green Bay is really in a tricky spot for the first time in the last 40 years at quarterback.
Yeah, the Packers pissed him off to win MVP last year. So I don't know. It'll just definitely just be very entertaining. But speaking of quarterbacks, there's a lot of quarterback battles going on with a couple of different teams, starting in San Francisco with the 49ers. Jimmy Garoppolo versus Trey Lance. So even though Kyle Shanahan has came out and said that Garoppolo will start this season, the 49ers, I don't think they would have traded for the third pick in the draft for no reason. And I think Lance is everything that Garoppolo isn't. He's more mobile. He has a better arm. He's uninjured. I think there's some potential that Lance could impress enough in the offseason to start. However, starting Lance would be a big risk because although he has a high ceiling, he also has a very low floor. So there's potential there. I want to know what your thoughts were on that.
It's a really interesting move to trade up for Trey Lance. I feel like Trey Lance was arguably the biggest gamble of any quarterback in this draft class. Obviously, you know what you're getting with Trevor Lawrence. You know what you're getting with Zach Wilson. Mac Jones, at the very least, is just incredibly accurate, so he's not going to throw it to the other team. Trey Lance, in 19 college games, he did it not at a Power 5 level, not even at an FBS level. Did it at North Dakota State. And in his 19 games, he put up incredible numbers. He had a completion percentage over 65%, threw for nearly 3,000 yards, had 30 touchdowns, just to one interception. So he's shown he has the ability to do it. I don't know if he wins the job week 1, but I think he's going to start at some point during the season. And I feel like that's a trend that has become pretty popular across the NFL these past few years, where if a rookie quarterback doesn't have to start week 1, NFL teams, NFL coaches like to kind of let them ease in once that bye week hits, move them in there, or if a team's struggling, move them in after that, and hopefully they start a spark. But Kyle Shanahan said he'd be surprised if Jimmy Garoppolo isn't with the 49ers or isn't their starting quarterback come week 1, and that for it to be a true competition, that Lance is going to have to make it that. I think a lot of it depends on, quite honestly, how healthy Jimmy Garoppolo is.
No, I agree. I agree that it's definitely a big gamble. I mean, Shanahan seems very confident, but I don't know. What do you think the tipping point would be to get Lance to start at some point this season? I agree with you that he probably will start later on, but they'll ease him into it. But what do you think that tipping point would be?
I don't know. I think it's really interesting to cover the 49ers and look at the 49ers. Obviously, they have a Super Bowl caliber roster, but they play in my opinion, the most difficult division in the NFL. You look at the Rams going all in, trading for Stafford, don't have a first-round pick for the next 7 or 8 years. You look at Seahawks, they have Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, obviously are always in the conversation. The Cardinals have a lot of young talent. I feel like that the biggest thing holding the Cardinals back is their coaching. And the 49ers are only a year away removed from playing in the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo leading them there. They have the ability to get to the Super Bowl if they stay healthy. Now, they're already suffering the injuries that they did last year. The injury bug has already hit them, and we're in day 2 or 3 of mandatory camp. So maybe they just can't stay healthy and it doesn't matter. But I feel like if they get off to a slow start, they're around 500, maybe a game over 500, game under 500, we could see Lance get the nod. The saying is always true, though. If you got two quarterbacks, you don't have any quarterback. And I'm afraid that could end up being the situation in San Francisco if Garoppolo isn't the guy early in the year and they bring in Lance, and Lance isn't as good as Shanahan wants. Now, Shanahan's been a quarterback whisperer throughout his entire career, so maybe he's able to get Lance developed earlier in his career.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, the 49ers, they're just in an interesting place right now in general. They've had consistent bad luck with their injuries. As you know, two players just suffered season-ending injuries on Monday. So I feel like they just have a lot to figure out right now with what they're doing, their plans. And I think a lot of the younger people on the team are just going to have to step it up, not only Lance, but the offensive linemen, their safeties. They might even need to be looking outside the building. But what do you think their game plan should be as far as injuries?
Got to find depth, right? I mean, hopefully those young guys that they sign, undrafted free agents, always seem to end up being a key point for different NFL franchises. I'm sure a couple of those guys are going to turn into diamonds that they were able to find if the 49ers are able to just stay mainly healthy. Keep Busse on the field. Keep him on the defensive line. Keep Garoppolo on his feet. Hopefully he returns a little bit to his 2019 form. Obviously, they have the weapons at skill positions on offense. And you mentioned safety is a little bit of a concern. But if you're able to get to the quarterback in the backfield with Busse, staying healthy is going to be huge for them. And I think on paper, they're the best team in that division. I know a lot of people like the Rams, and people obviously have a hard time picking against Russell Wilson and Seattle and Pete Carroll. But on paper, to me, the 49ers are the best team in the division if they stay healthy. Obviously, Kittle's there is a great weapon for whoever's throwing the ball. So I think if they're able to stay healthy, they should win that division.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all about just no more injuries for the 49ers. That should be their biggest goal going forward with camp. But another big quarterback battle that we're seeing is up in Chicago with the Bears. Justin Fields and Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle. So Dalton had the opportunity to start in Dallas after Dak Prescott went down and had honestly a very mediocre performance, in my opinion. This is why I question the Bears for thinking that he could be an upgrade over their other quarterbacks that they already have. But Fields is an amazing player. I would say one of the best quarterbacks Ohio State has ever seen. I think he has a really great chance of taking over a starter at any point in the season. What do you think?
Yeah, as a resident Bear fan in the conversation, I can tell you Bears fans were beyond excited to see the Bears trade up to the 11th pick to get Fields. It's funny you mentioned Dalton being mediocre. I mean, Bears fans have come to know mediocre quarterback pretty well. Andy Dalton was worse than Mitch Trubisky was last year, statistically speaking. I mean, Dalton in 11 games threw 14 touchdowns, 8 interceptions, just over 2,000 yards, and Trubisky in 10 games had a higher completion percentage, had 2 more touchdowns, equal amount of interceptions, obviously, and just over 2,000 yards as well. I mean, Mitch Trubisky was better than Andy Dalton was with worse weapons. Now I was off the Mitch bandwagon the moment the Bears drafted Mitch Trubisky. So I'm not defending Mitch Trubisky as a good quarterback, but Andy Dalton's not much better. And it's a similar situation to me, but I think there's more clarity in Chicago where Matt Nagy, Ryan Pace, obviously the GM, they know that they need to win. They know that they need to kind of get things rolling again, back to that 2018 form where they go 12-4, lose the Eagles on the double doink. Thanks a lot, Cody Parkey. You're still not welcome back in Chicago. If the Bears are able to win the division, and that's a possibility if Rodgers isn't in Green Bay, I think that Fields could get in and play early. And I think Fields could potentially win the job in training camp. I mean, there's been reports already out of their 3-day mini camp about some of the throws that he's been able to make. He's got the arm strength. He has the arm talent. He's got the escapability in the pocket. He can kind of get out and run a little bit. He has all the tools to be a really good NFL quarterback. The question is that time going to be now, or is that time going to be at some point this fall?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I think that really is the big question is Justin Fields going to be able to out-rifle the Red Rifle? But I don't know if you saw, the Bears did tweet saying that Dalton was the day one starting quarterback, and that did seem very counterproductive to me. I don't know why they would have said that. I don't know how true that is. But I don't know. I don't know what this says about the organization and what their plans are with Fields. I do think Fields is a great quarterback, and if I were to predict, I would say that he would start at some point this season. What would you say that as well?
Yeah, I think you have to say that Fields starts. I think you look at the Bears' schedule; it's incredibly tough what they have to go against this season. They do have their bye week in week 10. Coming out of their bye week, they travel to Baltimore, I believe, or Baltimore comes to Chicago. So that could be an opportunity for Fields to start. Let him start the second half of the season. But again, a lot of it's going to depend on what's in front of them and how the division's playing out. I mean, if it gets to week 5, 6, 7, it's not a good division at all, especially if Rodgers isn't there. I mean, the biggest competition Detroit's not good. They're not going to compete to win the division. The Bears have an aging defense, obviously headlined by Khalil Mack, but their secondary isn't as good as it was a couple years ago. You look at what Green Bay would be without Aaron Rodgers, there's a lot of concern. I think they're around a 500 team, and I think that's how important Aaron Rodgers is to Green Bay. And Kirk Cousins is no world beater in Minnesota. So it's a division where I think it's kind of up for grabs if Rodgers isn't there. And I think Fields has the ability to kind of add some star power, kind of add some ability to get you over the hump, get you some wins. Now, he may give you a loss or two along the way, but if he's getting you wins and he's not costing you too much, I wouldn't be surprised to see him start, come week 4, week 5, if he's able to stay healthy. Maybe Dalton gets a little dinged up and Fields takes the job and never looks back.
No, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's going to be very interesting to see what plays out with the Bears this season and with all these teams that we just mentioned, for sure. But with all of that being said, I think that's all of our major updates that we had on the show for today. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I don't have anything. Give me a follow on Twitter at Alec_Busse, and I appreciate you guys watching or listening today. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you guys for tuning in to the Sports 2.0 show, and we'll see you guys next time.